It is your Thursday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to have you guys back for another day. Good show coming up on today's show. Allow myself to introduce myself. Michael Grady, Timberwolves play-by-play voice, new Timberwolves play-by-play voice, will join me here in a little while. I had a chance to talk to him. It was a couple weeks ago now out at the State Fair, and I was kind of hanging on to it until we got a little bit closer to Timberwolves season, but I thought it'd be weird if I waited too long because then it'd sound like, wow, why it's from the State Fair, that stir the echoes of the State Fair. But it's still nice enough right now. We're not too far removed from the fair. I thought this might be the sweet spot for sharing that interview with you, so that'll be a little later on in the show. Got to get to the Brett Favre welfare scandal. Not a great look, not a good look, not even a mediocre look for the former Vikings great who also played for the Packers in his day. So we'll get to that story in a little bit. And everything from the Vikings game on Sunday last week was generally good news. I mean, it's hard to find a whole lot to nitpick from a 23-7 win over your biggest rival in Kevin O'Connell's head coaching debut. But I found one thing to be concerning while I was watching it, and the numbers from Pro Football Focus confirmed my eye test. So I'll get to that in a little bit as well. But first, what did I miss? I want to start with the Twins, as I often do this time of year. They won again yesterday, shutting out the Royals. In the big picture of this season, I feel like the last two nights were probably going to be too little, too late. Cleveland also won both those nights, so the Twins now just 21 games remaining to make up 5 games on Cleveland. Now, conveniently, they do have a 5-game series with Cleveland coming up here in just a couple of days, so the opportunity still does exist, but they'd have to be awfully good in that series. You would imagine they'd have to take at least 4 of those games to feel like they were in any kind of position to make a real run. And again, not out of the realm of possibility. Cleveland just swept a 3-game series at Target Field, so if the Twins got the sorts of pitching performances in that series that they've gotten the last 2 nights, where Joe Ryan, we talked about this extensively on Wednesday's show, had 7 no-hit innings a couple nights ago, and then Sonny Gray follows that up with 7 shutout innings in Wednesday's win over Kansas City. That said, like I said, probably too little, too late at this point. Fangraphs gives them like a 7% chance to make the postseason right now. Still a chance, not in the mathematically eliminated territory or anything like that yet, but it's statistically very improbable at this point. So what I want to do instead of focusing on those kind of flickering hopes is think ahead a little bit to 2023, and maybe the one thing that could give you a little bit of optimism about this team. And I mentioned this briefly, I think, with Royce. Can't remember if it was last week or this week, but one thing that they have been forced to do this year is explore a lot of different pitching options. Some of them haven't been as good as the others, but if you can envision a time where A, they don't have so many pitching injuries stacked up on top of each other, and B, that some of the minor league pitchers that they have are ready to produce, ready to be up in the big leagues, then you can imagine the 2023 starting rotation being maybe an asset. I'm thinking specifically here because we just watched Gray pitch 7 shutout innings. We just watched Joe Ryan pitch 7 hitless innings. I mean, those guys have been kind of the anchors of the rotation this year. Sonny Gray absolutely has been as advertised for them this year. That 7 shutout innings got his ERA under 3. In modern baseball, that is a very good number. Joe Ryan has been probably their most consistent starter in terms of taking the ball every 5-6 days, giving them pretty good outings. Now his numbers are a little lopsided versus good teams versus bad teams, but sometimes that's just the case. As Rocco Baldelli likes to say, the good teams are good for a reason. They win a lot of their games. It's hard to beat them. So you'd like to see Joe Ryan smooth that out as time goes on, but he's been quite good as a rookie. Those two, you can imagine anchoring their rotation again next year to a certain degree. Joe Ryan under contract for many more years, team control for many more years. Sonny Gray has a team option in 2023. That was a key piece of that trade before they got him, before the start of this season. So I would imagine, barring something strange, that gets picked up. Then you guys start talking about guys like Bailey Ober, who had a promising start to the year before that was derailed by injuries. Guys like Josh Winder, who looked like he had something going before being beset by injuries. Kenta Maeda will be back back next season fully, you would imagine, from that Tommy John surgery. We'll see where Chris Paddock is at, the guy they got from the Padres right before the season started. He had Tommy John early in the year. Does that mean he's a candidate to be back mid to late next season? Someone like Tyler Mahle, who's also under arbitration eligible in 2023 under team control, assuming he gets whatever this shoulder fatigue is sorted out. He is another option. Louis Varland, any number of guys in the minors. So just thinking ahead, and again, this season's not done yet, but just thinking ahead to what the pitching plan might be next season. You might not need to go into free agency thinking about guys like Dylan Bundy, guys like Chris Archer. No offense to those guys, major league pitchers in the 99.99 percentile of best pitchers in the world, but Bundy's been serviceable, especially for the role the Twins have had him in. Archer, I guess you could say that about him too, but when you've got two guys who don't work deep into games, who put a lot of strain on the bullpen, I just don't think that's a good plan to go into next year with. I mean, how much more relaxed can a team be when a starter goes 7 innings? I mean, they don't have to be 7 shutout innings, but just 7 innings these last 2 nights. Such a strange thing for this team, such a something we're not used to. So just thinking ahead a little bit, there'll be plenty of time to sort that all out. It's, more than 6 months till the start of the 2023 season. There's still meaningful games to be played this year, but just thinking ahead, maybe the pitching, kind of like the Vikings offensive line, when something's a detriment, a problem for so long, you worry about it. Now the Vikings offensive line might be okay, and maybe the Twins starting rotation will be okay in 2023 as well.
MGM Wine and Spirits is the choice for savings, service, and a great selection of spirits, pre-mixed cocktails, wines, and of course, ice-cold beers and hard seltzers. With over 30 locations throughout the Twin Cities and beyond, there's an MGM near you. Head to MGMWineandSpirits.com to find a convenient location in your area. Get social. Follow MGM on Facebook and Instagram for all the latest news and trends. Make great moments with MGM Wine and Spirits, your locally owned and operated choice for over 50 years. Save time, save money. Shop MGM.
We got Michael Grady, the new play-by-play voice for the Minnesota Timberwolves, coming here by way of New York. He was with the doing a lot of stuff with the Brooklyn Nets and with the WNBA in New York. Indiana native originally. So, Michael, welcome.
Al, thank you for having me.
Tell me, just right off the bat, I'm imagining this is your first Minnesota State Fair. You might not have.
This is.
Maybe you've been here to Minnesota a few times as a visiting media, but what's the experience been like so far?
I've been blown away. I know I need to get cookies from Miss Martha?
Sweet Martha,
Sweet Martha. I know I need to do that. So I've just been kind of overwhelmed by walking in and checking this out. Indiana State Fair is nice, but this is blowing it away by leaps and bounds. Like, this is fantastic. Fantastic.
This is a good welcome to Minnesota moment because it doesn't get much more quintessentially Minnesota than our state fair. But that said, I mean, you've like you said, it's kind of been a whirlwind. You got hired a couple weeks ago officially. The season's going to start here in a little over a month, preseason,
right.
Regular season, stuff like that.
Right.
Like, what has this kind of adjustment period been like?
It's been exciting. Being able to enjoy it with my family and, talking through everything and getting settled in, finding a place to live, getting to know the people within the organization, and we're getting really excited about meeting people in the community and the fan base as well. So it's been a roller coaster, and I've just kind of taken my hands off the steering wheel and just kind of enjoyed the ride. So I'm looking forward to it. It's been a whirlwind to this point, and we haven't even really gotten started yet.
For those who aren't familiar with your voice or how you might call a game, do you have a certain style that you present, or how do you characterize your approach to calling a game?
I would say passion is a hallmark.
Okay.
I grew up really loving the game, and I think one thing that we can't forget is that it is a game. It's serious. You want to win. You hate losing, all that type of stuff, but it's fun. and there'll be an element of fun and enjoyment. And on the broadcast with Jim, who's amazing at what he does as an analyst. And so I think folks are going to hear passion for the team, passion for the game. And I think we're going to be on a wild ride together. This is a talented team. The Western Conference is deep and tough. So every night is going to be a dogfight. But I think people are going to enjoy, the humor, the fun, the way the game is called, and again, that word passion.
Speaking of a wild ride, like I said, you came from New York, Brooklyn. That was a season last year. How did you kind of navigate everything that was happening with the Brooklyn Nets last year?
I tell you what, one of the things I'm excited about is just being able to talk about basketball and enjoy basketball.
Not talk about vaccination status.
None of that stuff. If a guy's happy, does he really want to be here? That type of thing. But I loved every minute of my time and the people there in Brooklyn and have great admiration for all of them. But this is an opportunity that I'm really, really, really excited about with this group. A young group, a hungry group. The back against the wall, us versus everybody type situation. There's a lot to get excited about with this group, and I'm excited to be able to be a part of telling the stories.
Now, speaking of telling stories, I love hearing people's stories of kind of how they got to where they are. Yeah. Maybe kind of give me a description of your path to, how you got from, little kid growing up in Indianapolis to where you're sitting in this chair right now.
Well, I knew I wanted to get into sports broadcasting probably during the 1998 NBA playoffs.
Reggie Miller.
So I was a big Pacer fan growing up, so all those battles with the Knicks in the mid-90s, that whole thing. But I really started paying attention to sports broadcasting in 98 and watching Bob Costas and him call the NBA Finals. And, of course, Game 6 with Michael Jordan's final shot in the Bulls uniform. And I said, this is something that I really want to do. My voice started to change a year later.
Okay.
And we had a broadcasting program at my high school that I just kind of gravitated towards and put everything into it. And that just carried me from there through college and then getting a job out of school at a radio station where I was just a board op, just pushing buttons, not doing anything on air, and then producing a sports talk show, eventually getting on air, doing work with the Pacers as a PA announcer, hosting a radio show for nearly a decade, being a sports anchor on the local ABC affiliate, and I mentioned PA announcer for the Pacers.
Yeah.
And doing those three things at the same time for 3 years.
Busy.
Before New York came calling.
That sounds busy.
Yeah, it was. But again, passion, love, appreciation. I'm like a kid in a candy store. I never would have imagined that I'd be able to, I was confident and hope that I'd be able to accomplish these things. But if I were to tell 15-year-old Michael, this is what you're going to be doing, then I'd be sitting here having this conversation as the play-by-play for the Timberwolves. I don't know that I'd have believed it.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how things work, though. It sounds like hard work has gotten you certainly to this point. Has it been basketball that's been kind of your number one passion in terms of the route you wanted to take within broadcasting?
Yeah, NBA was always number one. NFL's not been far off. I love football too, but basketball was always it. I couldn't escape it. Couldn't get away from it. Just a student of the game. Love watching. Love having conversations about it, and of course, love calling the action. So basketball's long been number one.
As you think about the Timberwolves this season, and if you guys just stopping by or walking by, I'm chatting with Michael Grady, the new play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves on Valley Sports North. So enjoy listening to him a lot more this year and in years to come. But as you think about this year's team, they did a lot. They made a big step last year to get to the playoffs for the first time in 4 years, and now you bring in Tim Connolly. He makes the blockbuster trade for Rudy Gobert. There's a certain set of expectations here that maybe hasn't been present for a while. How do you as someone who's up to this point probably looked at it as from the outside looking in, how do you assess this franchise and team and their direction?
Well, they're hungry for sure, and I know that there's a bad taste in their mouths from the way this past postseason ended.
Yeah,
giving up big leads, being right there, but they got a taste of what playoff action is all about and what it takes to be successful. And so there's a hunger that's been evident during this offseason and the work that they're putting in so that they don't have that feeling again in the future. It still won't be easy. The Western Conference is extremely deep, extremely tough. Every game will be brutal. But that was a great learning experience, what they were able to go through and getting in the play-in scenario and then battling with Memphis in a series that they probably should have won.
Could have won at the very least.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you have, was it 3 double-digit leads in the fourth quarter?
And not 10-point leads.
No, like big ones.
Like big leads.
Big ones.
That they let get away. So that doesn't sit well with anybody. And if you're a competitor, you can't wait to get back into the gym to rewrite history. So when you bring in Rudy Gobert, I think one of the things that would be really compelling is that, okay, they may have offensive struggles on a given night or whatever it may be, but what they'll be able to do defensively should be able to make up for that on nights where the offense isn't necessarily clicking. And defense wins championships, old cliche, but that is what they're going to be relying on this upcoming season. So teams will try to counter that with maybe some small ball and try to get them in foul trouble, whatever it may be, but having Rudy Gobert, multi-time defensive player of the year as an anchor in the middle, allowing Cat to have free reign defensively and on the offensive side of the ball is a dynamic that I think a lot of people are excited to see. That and Anthony Edwards taking his game to another level in year 3.
Now, there's going to be games where you're calling that they do blow a lead, I'm sure. There's going to be things, they're going to lose games this year. There's no doubt about that. I think whenever you see like a social media debate or just people talking about the broadcast team for anybody, it's always the subject of, oh, he's too much of a homer, or oh, he's too hard, or it's like no one ever says, it's just right or something like that. As you think about that, how do you call a game when the team is either bad or is bad that night? And I think Jim Peterson is known pretty well for being a pretty honest analyst and will speak his mind and will not not hold back in offering constructive critiques of what's going on. How do you present that as you're calling a game?
I think constructive critique is the right word there. Okay. You don't want to go overboard, and you don't want to just rip a group of guys. But from a credibility standpoint, you need to be honest as a broadcaster. And in whether the team is winning out there or having an off night, whatever it may be, I think the folks that are watching are Timberwolves fans, and they're also basketball fans. And so if there's a game where they're playing the Lakers and LeBron is going off, you have to appreciate what you're seeing right in front of you. If Steph Curry is going off, you have to appreciate what's happening. So I'm not going to groan and go, oh, Steph Curry got another one. No, we're basketball fans. We're watching something awfully impressive. The great thing is we're going to see Anthony Edwards do that more often than not, and we'll be able to enjoy that ride watching him. We'll be able to watch Karl Anthony Towns have more success than not on any given night with his skill and ability. Rudy Gobert, what he does on the defensive side of the ball, and he's eager to show what he can do on the offensive end too. D'Angelo Russell, can't forget about him, and the other pieces on the roster. So there'll be stars and great teams coming in, but this is a great team in itself to get excited about. So we'll call the game. They'll obviously lean toward the Timberwolves, obviously, but we're basketball fans too, and we're just going to enjoy the action and enjoy telling the story over the course of a game and over the course of an entire season.
Do you have games that you've called, been a part of in your past that stand out as like, I can't believe I got to be a part of that, or just memorable moments in your career so far?
It's a treat every time I get to call a game. So last season, for those who know, I was with Brooklyn and was able to call a handful of games, and you have Kyrie Irving on the roster, you have Kevin Durant on the roster. The game that was probably most memorable to me was a game where neither of those guys played. And the Nets were at Madison Square Garden, which is the Mecca, of course, and they were down by 28 points at one point in the game, and then put together a comeback with basically role players, no real star players out there on the floor, and mounted a comeback at the Garden, and that was probably the highlight of the season for me. But I also had a 51-point Kevin Durant game they called, and a 60-point Kyrie Irving game last season. So there were some great moments over this past year that were a lot of fun to call.
Aside from the obvious kind of star players here in Minnesota, who are you looking forward to watching the most or getting to know the most as you kind of look at this roster?
I'm honest with you, everybody, top to bottom, so the stars, as you mentioned, but I think when you look at the Western Conference and just how deep it is, that you're going to be relying on your second unit a lot. So I'm excited to see what Kyle Anderson looks like in a Minnesota Timberwolves uniform. Slow-mo earned that nickname, but he's a quality player that should really help out this Timberwolves squad. But Austin Rivers, a new guy on the roster. Jaden McDaniels is a guy that isn't talked about a whole lot, but I'm excited to see what he's going to do. Probably will be in that starting lineup, but looking forward to checking him out. So everybody on the roster is going to play an important role in the success of this team, and everybody on the roster that's returning had to look in the mirror after what transpired last season in that loss to the Memphis Grizzlies. So everybody's going to be important, and I'm looking forward to getting to know all the guys. And, again, I'm saying a lot, telling their story.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what you do, though. I'm enjoying this conversation with Michael Grady, the new play-by-play voice for the Timberwolves. Just a few more things for you before we wrap up. I mean, as you kind of think about, I had Tim Connolly, the new president of basketball operations, out here on Friday. We were just talking about expectations. Like, Karl Anthony Towns signed his extension a couple months ago, and he said championship or bust. Like, that's a big thing to say, and Tim Connolly kind of rolled his eyes like, yeah, he said that. Maybe I wish he would have phrased it a little differently or something like that. But, you know, there's so many good teams. There's so many good players. You know, teams can have expectations going into this season. What should this team's – what level do you think they're on right now? And, you know, what's the kind of arc for – you know, a team that's ascending but maybe not all the way there yet?
Yeah, I'm not mad at Cat for saying championship or bust. I don't think you say that or should say that if you're not kicking butt in the gym during the off season, right? So that makes me excited in terms of what he's going to look like this upcoming season if he's going to allow himself to say championship or bust. So he's got to be putting a lot of work in the gym, and I'll be curious to see that. For me, looking at this squad, and again looking at the West, if they were able to get home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs, I think that's huge. I think that's what I'm looking at. If you can get home court advantage in the first round, that's huge. So top 4 seeds in the Western Conference. And again, you got Golden State.
Yeah.
You got the Lakers at full strength.
Yeah, Lakers aren't going to be the Lakers.
Right, they're not going to be the terrible squad they were a season ago. That's if they can stay healthy, obviously.
Right.
The Clippers with Kawhi Leonard back in the mix. Jamal Murray is now back with the Denver Nuggets. They're going to be a problem. The Phoenix Suns were the top seed in the Western Conference last season. New Orleans Pelicans are welcoming back Zion Williamson, and they were one of the bright stories this past year. The Dallas Mavericks with Luka, and they added some pieces.
Man,
this is I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out, but the West, that just, again, shows just how tough the Western Conference is. And if the Timberwolves are able to get a top 4 seed, I think that's a huge win for the squad.
Now, they were a play-in last year. In the old system, they'd have been an easy 7 seed. But do you like the play-in? I wasn't sure what I was going to think of it, but I think I like it now.
I do like the play-in because in previous years, before the play-in was introduced, you really only cared about the top handful of seeds. Toward the end of the season, you didn't really care about teams that were 7 and 8. You really weren't paying attention to them. Now you're paying attention to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Yeah, right.
And they're all in a battle to see if they can get in that play-in scenario. So in terms of intrigue, in terms of viewership, I think it's huge for the NBA because now there's more eyeballs that are watching everything transpire. And so that moment where the Timberwolves beat the Clippers and Pat Beverly is jumping on the scorers table and Anthony Edwards is doing the same, it's a play-in scenario, but it created a lot of excitement, got a lot of people talking where we wouldn't have that in a different year. The year before that, you had Golden State and the Lakers in a play-in scenario. So it adds drama, it adds intrigue, it adds eyeballs on television, which is, of course, bringing in money, and the NBA loves that. So I love it from the intrigue and the drama standpoint.
I meant to ask you this earlier, but do you have anybody that you've considered a mentor or somebody in this industry that you've kind of watched more closely than others as you've kind of developed your style or your how you call games?
I've tried to pull a lot from a lot of people. I think Bob Costas has always been my North Star. Always wanted to kind of be a combination of him and Ahmad Rashad.
Okay.
Mark Boyle is the radio play-by-play guy of the Indiana Pacers and a good friend. And he was, when I was growing up, I'd turn the television down and have the radio up. So he was a big part of the soundtrack of my basketball viewing experience as a kid. Mike Breen is unbelievable at what he does. Joe Buck, is terrific at what he does. And then I had an amazing education these last 5 years in Brooklyn watching Ian Eagle,
Yeah.
who's one of
Yeah.
the greats in this industry. So there are a lot of people. Kevin Harlan, who of course has Minnesota roots, and he's amazing. His enthusiasm I love. Gus Johnson is a great voice who gets a lot of people excited. So there's quite a few. But from a young age, it got me excited and wanted to get into broadcasting. Bob Costas was number one.
A couple more things along those lines too, just like developing that relationship with an audience, which is so key, and those the best do it kind of naturally. When you're starting out brand new, how do you kind of develop that relationship with the fans and people who are going to come to you every night?
Well, I think you let it happen organically, and I am excited about joining the Timberwolves family. But number one, I'm excited about joining this Minnesota family, joining this community and being a part of this community, and that excites me. And so it reminds me of my time, again, growing up in Indianapolis and fans getting excited about the team, and you're rubbing elbows and high-fiving and hugging people coming from all different types of walks of life. And sports is a great equalizer. And so I love that. I appreciate that. I experienced that in Indiana, had joy in experiencing that in Brooklyn, and excited about having that here as well in Minneapolis. And so, again, sports being a great equalizer, my passion for the game, the community's passion for the game. I mean, we're all on the same train. So you let it happen organically, have fun with the broadcast, meet as many people as I possibly can, and just enjoy this ride.
Michael Grady, last thing for you. What's the best thing you've done in Minnesota so far, aside from the fair, and what else are you looking forward to kind of exploring as you get more comfortable in this community?
I'm a foodie, so as many restaurants as I can get introduced to and check out, I'm all about it. And so some good food spots, and really all meals. I'm a big breakfast spot guy, with some good lunch spots, some great spots to go after games as well. So that's what I'm probably most excited about. I've been able to check out a handful so far, so looking forward to getting some more.
You'll get more.
A lot more on the list.
Well, Michael Grady, new play-by-play voice for the Timberwolves. Really enjoyed having you here on the Star Tribune stage. Just give him a hand, and welcome to the community, and good luck this season.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
I really hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Michael Grady, the new Timberwolves play-by-play voice. It's going to be a big year. I mean, this thing's starting up sooner than we think. Training camp's like less than 2 weeks away, I think. Media day is like 11 days away, where we get a chance to talk to some of these new guys, kind of get a feel for where their heads are at for the start of this season and beyond. So I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be a fun winter of sports with, the Timberwolves, the Wild, whatever the Vikings are going to do this year. It could be a pretty fun year of sports watching, sports viewing in the Twin Cities, and covering sports in the Twin Cities. So I'm looking forward to that, and that will more to come, much more to come on the Timberwolves as time goes on. Let's get to a couple more stories at the end of the day here. Brett Favre. I don't know if you guys have been following this story, but this welfare story out of Mississippi is just really disgusting. We know he's had to pay back some money, but it all relates to kind of wanting to get money from the state to help fund a volleyball facility at his daughter's college, University of Southern Mississippi, where he went. Southern Miss. So it's all these text messages that we're seeing now between he and some government officials about, hey, can you help with this project? Who knew what? Who knew where the money was coming from? Just very shady stuff. It just makes you wonder, like, what it really makes me wonder is how much of this stuff goes on every day with high-profile people that we just never even learn about. And he was very concerned about people ever finding out about where this money came from, stuff like that. So it just bothers me to read everything about this story. I would encourage you to go read about it, because it will not leave you with a good impression of Brett Favre. Speaking of football, let's finish with the cooler. Patrick Peterson was a concern of mine when I watched the Vikings game on Sunday. Got lit up a couple times. That very first play of the game where Christian Watson was wide open, he beat Patrick Peterson with a double move. Should have been a touchdown if Christian Watson would have held on to the ball. He got beat for a long play later in the game as well. So I was wondering, what was Patrick Peterson looking like according to Pro Football Focus? And it was not great. His week 1 grade out of Out of all the qualified cornerbacks, his grade was 50.5. That was 50th out of 60 qualified corners in week 1. So I'm just a little worried that Patrick Peterson has lost a step, and if he's lost a step, where does that leave them in their secondary? Because I know Cameron Dantzler had a good grade. I know they're fairly high on Andrew Booth, and but beyond that, I just don't know what the depth is. If Patrick Peterson has more games like he had Sunday, secondary is suddenly going to become a primary concern for the Vikings. That will do it for me today. There'll be plenty more Vikings talk on Friday's show. Ben Gessling, Star Tribune beat writer, expected to join me on that show and should be a staple of Friday daily deliveries during the Vikings football season. Thank you for joining me today. Back at it again on Friday.